Chinatown, in Boston, in Chicago, and in Washington, D.C.
I grew up on Hudson Street. Everybody's father worked similar jobs. Everybody's mother sewed.
This was the beginning of our journey to meet the American dream.
The evolution and challenges of these unique American neighborhoods.
They feel a belonging, and that's what we're trying to preserve.
A Tale of Three Chinatowns on Local USA. Local USA was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, and the Wincoat Foundation.
Chinatown for me is a cultural touchstone. This is a place where my parents and grandparents came and lived when they first came to the United States.
It's a group of folks that actually came here to settle, and they were looking for a better life.
I can connect with my heritage and my identity.
Where newcomers to the country or to the neighborhood can go to have something they're familiar with.
You can do business with people who understand the way you do business culturally.
This is their spot, their place where they actually said, you know what, this is home.
And if you've been to a Chinatown lately in a number of East Coast cities like New York or Boston or even Philadelphia, you might have noticed something. They're getting less, well, Chinese.
I grew up on Hudson Street. I lived there from my birth. In my childhood, it was really like a village. It's a village model because you only had a limited number of Chinese immigrants. They were Taiwanese rural people with kind of rural values. You could say it's brotherhood, but it's neighborliness, certain basic level of honesty and kind of helping each other, and it's small. We played in the streets. Very easy to make jump ropes. On my street, there was one brother and sister who had a set of bikes. So we just took turns with the bikes, and all toys were shared. I attended the Quincy School, and we didn't speak English. The only person in the classroom who spoke English was the teacher. Everybody spoke Taiwanese. All the children spoke Taiwanese. You know, everybody knew everybody else. Everybody ate the same food. Everybody's father worked similar jobs. Everybody's mother sewed. We had a lot of freedom to go in and out of each other's houses. To me, it was Taisan paradise.
When my father came to this country, the United States, he was about 18 years old. My father was a merchant who worked in Chicago. And naturally, you bring your children. I came to this country at the age of 15 from Guangdong. Came into here, it's different. Now everything's on my own. The biggest thing is loneliness. At those days, 1950, is a lot of discrimination going on. And I used to write to my sister in China, said, don't come to this country. It's very difficult. We're lonely.
We lived right on 6th Street, 6th and 8th Street Northwest. We had a house, and we had basically 3 rooms, one for my parents, one for the girls, and one for 3 of us, the sons. My father, who is Ham H. Moy, he grew up in Alexandria, Virginia, and then when he graduated from high school, he was drafted in World War II. He met my mom from China and eventually got back to the United States. They came out here and lived in Chinatown with some relatives, and then eventually he wound up buying a house. Going from DC Chinatown was very memorable, only because we had a lot of our friends who lived very close by. Whenever we wanted to do something, we would just knock on the doors, run over to the house, and say we wanted to play football or basketball. We'd go to a certain park or just walk over there. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have malls. We didn't have luxury cars that we kind of like enjoy the time we had together back then.
Welcome. Tonight, we are proudly presenting our 14th annual Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month event. I'm John Abbott, President and CEO of GBH, and we are extremely proud to be in year 14, and the program gets more interesting and exciting every year. GBH, GBH World, and WTTW in Chicago. That's a new wrinkle this year. We're very excited to be collaborating with our colleagues in Chicago. We have come together to present tonight's discussion on the vibrant past and uncertain future of Chinatowns in Boston and Chicago, as well as the new local AAPI affinity neighborhoods, such as Boston's Little Saigon. Thank you to our audience here at GBH, and we also welcome hundreds of viewers watching remotely from WTTW in Chicago, here in Boston, and from locations across our country in celebration of AAPI Heritage Month. Our commitment to showcasing content by and about the AAPI communities is evident year-round. In May alone, GBH World will feature more than 50 films by and about Asian American and Pacific Islanders, including 10 original films that address issues about AAPI hate and the loss of lives and jobs due to COVID-19, to the fate of Chinatowns across the country. And I can't talk about the accomplishments of GBH World without saluting Liz Cheng, GBH's general manager, and the mastermind, the tireless mastermind of these events year in and year out. So World has become what World is because of Liz Cheng. And one fascinating film from our weekly series, America Reframed, Geographies of Kinship, debuts on GBH and on WTTW World. That's the way World works. GBH builds it, creates it, and then, thanks to Liz, communities in more than 75% of the country share the same channel and the same lineup committed to exploring diverse storytelling with diverse makers. America Reframed Geographies of Kinship debuts on May 19th. It weaves together the complex lives of 4 adult adoptees who were born in South Korea and who search for their heritage and history. We've also commissioned 7 emerging AAPI filmmakers in partnership with ADOC to explore the challenges of immigration, COVID, and violence against AAPI communities, as well as the joys of family, shared culture, and hopeful futures. Some reflections of which you saw there in the clip. On May 23rd, we will present these Asian American stories of resilience and beyond in an event in partnership with the Boston Globe, the Center for Asian American Media, and the Boston Asian American Film Festival. We'll follow up with more information about more events and films tomorrow via email, so that we'll keep you posted, so you didn't, in case you were pulling out a pencil and taking notes. Don't worry, you're going to get an email. I want to thank those responsible for planning tonight's event, members of the GBH Board of Trustees, our Board of Advisors, the Advisors Council, and our Community Advisory Board, and leaders in our community who have been wonderful partners, supporters, counselors, and boosters of GBH's work. I also want to thank WTTW World for partnering with us on this event and amplifying AAPI content with their audiences in the greater Chicago area, also called Chicagoland, I'm told. To get the evening started, it is my great pleasure to introduce Tim Russell from WTTW.
Hello, I'm Tim Russell, VP of Community Engagement and diversity, equity, and inclusion at WTTW. And our purpose is to enrich lives, engage communities, and inspire exploration. WTTW is proud to co-produce tonight's AAPI event along with GBH World. Tonight, we will focus on the resilience of the AAPI community by examining what makes affinity neighborhoods survive and thrive. The story is unfolding daily as America evolves. People who were historically excluded are finding their power in coming together and building cultural centers. The documentary, A Tale of Three Chinatowns, examined the forces that are challenging Chinatowns in Chicago, Washington, D.C., and Boston. It features the voices of residents, community activists, developers, government officials, and others who are trying to preserve these neighborhoods. Here is an excerpt.
All Chinatowns have served as a sanctuary role from the 1850s onward with the anti-Chinese era. The Chinese at first were welcomed because of the need for cheap labor, but then they were harassed and had to gather back together. In numbers, we have greater level of protection.
We have seen, as historians looking back into this period of the 19th century, that the term Chinatown gets used very loosely. Basically, if there's a cluster of Chinese seemingly residing in even a block or a street, it suddenly gets labeled as Chinatown. So the space itself becomes racialized as connected to Chinese people. But Chinatown itself isn't just simply because the Chinese chose to live there, it's also a process of racial segregation. It is partly created as a result of whites not wanting the Chinese to expand beyond a certain part of the city, and so definitely limiting their abilities to live or work.
There were not just local laws, there were state laws that were anti-Chinese in flavor. In the 1860s and 70s, Chinese could not own property, Chinese could not intermarry.
The Chinese by that time were in all kinds of activities, fisheries, farming, and they were working very well and working very hard and generally paid less.
After the establishment of Chinatown in San Francisco, we actually saw the expansion of the Chinese community into the United States. And then they started going elsewhere and forming Chinatowns in Los Angeles, Seattle, Portland, as well as throughout the West and the Northwest. But we're met with violence, lynchings in old Los Angeles, Rock Springs, Wyoming massacre, the Snake River massacre. All this type of violence drove the Chinese out of these settlements where they had their own gold mines or their own fisheries. Where did they go? They were forced to go back to either larger Seattle Chinatown or San Francisco Chinatown.
The context of why the Chinese were driven out of the West was that the very railroad they built brought Euro-American immigrants to the West.
The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 really marks the first time that Congress has ever named a national or ethnic group to be barred from immigration. This is a profound moment in the nation's history where it's clearly pointing to one group and saying, you are not welcome here. The fact that the U.S. federal government has passed something like Chinese exclusion really sends a signal that the government is no longer there to protect Chinese.
And there's a campaign against the Chinese. They're taking our jobs. You know, white people should be working these jobs, and the Chinese were vilified. And they were physically driven out of small towns, and there's no place to go but to the cities and to the east. And that's the first settlers coming in around 1870. Chicago, New York were probably the main destinations, but then they went on to places like Boston and DC.
My father came to this country when he was 13. My grandfather was already here running a laundry, and they wanted to bring my father over. By 1944, he became of age, so he was drafted. My father served in the Army, and actually, we have a picture of his company. They were all white males, except for my father and one of his colleagues, who were both Chinese, and they were about a head shorter than everyone else. After World War II, and he went back and married my mother. They came here and lived in Chinatown. So I was born here in Boston. We lived on Hudson Street in a row house. It's basically a two-room apartment with the bathroom down the hall. Back when I was a kid, Chinatown was a really vibrant neighborhood, a residential community. There were 2 or 3 main streets, Hudson Street where we lived, Tyler Street, and then Harrison Avenue. And both sides of the street were these 3-story tenement buildings, row houses, full of families. So we would just walk out the door and we would have friends to play with. And since we all went to the old Quincy School on Tyler Street, we're all classmates too, so we just knew everybody. My father initially worked in a hand laundry, and then he moved on to work in restaurants as a waiter. Most of my friends, their fathers were working in restaurants, and my mother and a lot of the other mothers worked in sewing factories as garment workers.
Amazing film, and don't forget it's premiering on World Channel on May 23rd. My name is Liz Cheng, General Manager for Television at GBH, and also for our national documentary service, World Channel. Joining us today in a very exciting way is on the monitors are 2 filmmakers. First is Penny Lee. She's a co-producer and editor of A Tale of 3 Chinatowns and works for network clients like the Discovery Channel, National Geographic, and the Travel Channel. And then next to her on the other monitor is Lisa Mao. Hi, Lisa, who is the director, writer, and co-producer of A Tale of 3 Chinatowns and the excerpt you just saw. She has created more than 500 hours of programming on platforms like the History Channel, National Geographic Channel, Animal Planet, and Investigation, Discovery, and more. Clearly, they worked on this film in their free time. And of course, our third panelist, of course, is Andrew Leong, who you already saw in the film. And he is an associate professor in the philosophy department, legal studies, as well as LatinX and Asian American Studies at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. And he serves as an advisor and also on camera for A Tale of 3 Chinatowns. Clearly, he's a Renaissance man. So welcome, all of you. Excited to get right in it. Despite your unflinching look at the past and future of Chinatowns, I definitely felt a great deal of affection for Chinatowns and for this film. And this was clearly a labor of love that you did in addition to your daily work. Why was it important to make this film?
Hi. Delighted to be here. And can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
Okay. It's important for me, because I have a connection with Washington, D.C.'s Chinatown. I am first generation immigrant. When I first came to the United States, my family lived in Washington, D.C. So the community of D.C.'s Chinatown is very dear to my heart. I've met many friends, lifelong friends there. I met my husband there, got married, had Chinese banquet in the restaurants there. And as over the years, things have changed in our community. And every time we get together with friends, whether at weddings or funerals, we talk about what life in Chinatown was like. So those stories are just precious to me. And so preserving stories is important in preserving history. I mean, it's like, what is the next generation going to know if you don't share these stories with people? and preserve these stories. And so our film is a way that we can bring these stories in light and sharing it with the public from, different cities and different experiences that people have experienced and lived in these Chinatowns. And that's why in our film, we've interviewed, over 40 people. And we decided not to use a narrator because the voices of our subjects are very important. So we try to allow our subjects to tell their stories and to share those stories. So again, going back to why we did this film, preserving story, preserving history is important.
Excellent, and certainly makes a lot of sense, and adds to that authenticity to have actual people's voices as opposed to a voice of God. And Lisa, how about you? Why was this film important for you?
Yeah, Liz, thank you for having us. We're so honored that, we're doing this event. Again, just, it's wonderful. Thank you again. So for me, my connection to Chinatown is not as close as Penny's is. My immigrant story, my family story is just a different pathway. For me, I didn't really go to Chinatown often when I was a kid. We maybe went 5 times in my life as a child. It was a special place that my parents wanted to expose us to Chinese culture and food in when I was a child. But again, we didn't go that often. For me, I would say that, I felt like these stories were very important to echo what Penny said, because, we can't lose these stories. I mean, I think that this film obviously is about gentrification, and in a way that's the erasing of a culture from a location. And for me, Penny and I worked together on another film called Through Chinatown's Eyes, April 1968. And through that experience, it was very obvious, wow, DC's Chinatown, it's a shadow of itself. And so really, through that experience, it felt like, wow, we need to amplify voices, just amplify voices of those who are there and in the shadows and who need a platform to be heard. So for me, that was really my motivation to do this film.
And so why Boston, Chicago, and D.C.? It's fascinating the way that you weave their stories, but specifically, why did you choose those 3 cities?
Yeah, so after we did the Through Chinatown's Eyes film, we kept thinking to ourselves, what could we do next? And honestly, in screenings, people would ask us, what are we doing next? So it just felt like a natural progression for us to look at gentrification. What happened after 1968? How did that perhaps affect DC's Chinatown? And we landed on gentrification. And then in looking at that story, we thought, we can't really look at this in a vacuum. Where else can we go? And we heard, whispers, and also saw them ourselves, that, Chinatowns and other cities were also changing. So it felt like, wow, okay, we should look at this issue, because clearly it's happening everywhere. And also not just to Chinatowns, but to other affinity neighborhoods. And so we ended up landing on DC, obviously, because we have this connection here, and DC's current state is so extreme in terms of what happened to its Chinatown. And then in our research, we met Dr. Leong, who, in talking to Andrew, he's one who shared with us, actually, Chicago's is growing. And I was like, what? That's incredible. So we explored that. And then in the end, Boston, Penny, through her work with the CCBA, had a lot of connection to Boston, and had shared with me that, look, there's a lot of activism happening there, and the sort of the pressures, the players. It seemed like a very diverse mix of issues. So Boston it was like a natural third city.
Well, it's definitely a cautionary tale.
We were able to, through our networks, through my friends in Boston, we got introduced to Andrew, and then Andrew became my advisor, and we've learned so much from him. And so we're grateful to have him on board on our team.
And as you say, it's definitely a cautionary tale. As I was watching the film when we first started talking, oh gosh, about a year ago. And it's fascinating in that way. You have D.C., which has pretty much no Chinatown. You have Chicago, which is an enormously growing Chinatown of almost 30 blocks. And then you have Boston, which is in a crossroads. It seems like it could go either way. And Andrew, I think you sort of talk about that. What are some of those challenges that Boston has to face and other Chinatowns, and even Chicago now, even though it's success? But there's so many challenges still.
Well, I mean, D.C. is the model as to where we don't want Chinatowns to become. You know, what I've termed the Disneyfication of Chinatowns, that is really a place simply for tourists, where it's lacking in its residential component. There's no small businesses. And that's the threat for Boston or Chicago. For Boston specifically, you know, we face a lot more pressures from development. So if obviously if you folks go down to Boston Chinatown, you can see the skyscrapers coming in. Which was actually some of the goal that a former BRA director did not want. You know, these huge skyscrapers that will create this wind tunnel effect, you know, that Stephen Coyle talked about, you know, on Lower Washington Street. Yet, there it is, right now. And so that's the threat that we have, that because the small-time landlords in Chinatown see the changes that's happening within Lower Washington Street and around Chinatown, they too want a piece of the pie. And so what they wind up doing is to probably displace their tenants, gut the units in order to jack up the rent. And so that's the kind of threat that we might see in Chicago.
It's amazing seeing in the film that map that at one time, following the route of the transatlantic railroad construction, there used to be 18 or more robust Chinatowns in places like Deadwood, South Dakota. We know about that because of the HBO series. Rock Springs, Wyoming, Omaha, Nebraska. But after 1880, so many of these Chinatowns disappeared. And maybe that's sort of at the root of what is the issue around these Chinatowns, because they started off as a place that they put Chinese people because they didn't, or back then, or AAPI, because they didn't want them mixing. So if you could talk a little bit about the history that was described in
Yeah, and unfortunately, we had to cut, I know this is killing us, right? About 30 minutes or 40 minutes of anti-Asian violence history from the 19th century, you know, off the film. Maybe that should be a different documentary, you guys.
Yeah.
But that really shows the kind of pressures that we were experiencing as a Chinese American and eventually an Asian American community, because all those particular communities weren't necessarily within an urban city area like San Francisco or even Seattle, right? We're talking about Deadwood. We're talking about, back then, Denver, Colorado, all these places. And that tells you, that informs you that at one point in time, the Chinese had the freedom of mobility until the waves of anti-Chinese sentiments happened, right? Starting from the 60s, 70s, 80s onward, culminating with the passage of the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act, which really was not the first Exclusion Act against, you know, a particular racialized group. That was one of the things that we didn't have a chance to really correct. It's the 1875 Page Act that really forbade Japanese, Chinese, Mongolian women, and so it started there. But that's a national proposal and a proposal. I mean, a bill, right? But it started way back in California. All these various different states, very, very similar to what we're experiencing right now. And so when those waves of anti-Chinese sentiment happened, that began to cause all the various different massacres that we saw. And we were only able to sneak in a few of them, whereas if you do your research online, you will find one after another. And those particular communities just totally disappeared. They were wiped out, they were lynched, they were burnt. And it began to push some of these other, the Chinese community, to the west and to the Midwest. And then we saw a different wave of anti-Chinese sentiment through urban renewal. So for instance, one of the cities that was highlighted was St. Louis. And they had a Chinatown from, 1869 until urban renewal, the 1960s, when Bush Stadium came in. And so this is how we go about defining anti-Asian violence, right? That impacts our community. It's not just through individual, acts of killing, but it is redlining. It is the various, it's Japanese American internment. It is the Red Scare during the 50s, building all the way up to the present.
So it's fascinating. What began and oftentimes as a negative thing, i.e. being segregated outside of the community, that Chinese Americans and AAPI Americans in affinity neighborhoods today have turned that into a positive. It's that sort of self-segregation in a way that some people talk about, but it's become a haven oftentimes for people. And so we find that, especially new immigrants, when they come to our various communities, they like these communities because they know the language, because they know the culture. And there are also services that help them. And, we'd be remiss in not talking about Chicago, Chinatown, and their success, which was based on being kind of kicked out of town, and then they turned that again from a negative into a positive. So if we could roll that next film, which is founder of Chicago Dragons Athletic Association, so it's from the clip, Gene Lee, described how Chicago's Chinatown was forced to move from its original location. He's followed by Chicago panelist Ernest C. Wong, former chair of the Chinese American Services League, who worked on many landscape design projects in Chicago's Chinatown, and Dr. Lisa Yun Lee, executive director of the National Public Housing Museum. So let's take a look.
I'm going to give you a little story about this Chinatown. 107 years at Sir Mack and Wentworth. Back in 1912, before we moved to this location, we were at Clark and Van Buren, South Loop. Our business people were not able to extend their leases, buy property, do upgrades. What's going on? Well, what's going on was that we were not at the table. We had no voice. We had no input in regards to our future or our issues, our needs. The planners, the people that had the power, wanted to expand downtown. We were not part of that plan. So we were looking around and we found this area, Sir Mack and Wentworth, which is why we have 107 years. How does that relate to politics? Everything revolves around politics.
So Chicago's Chinatown was interesting after they had moved from basically the South Loop downtown area into predominantly a Irish-Italian neighborhood on the south side, 22nd Street. And this was really pretty much an undesirable part of town at that time in the early 1900s. But it wasn't until really the 1950s that things started to really develop a lot more. The businesses were flourishing. More and more Chinese continued to move to Chicago. And that was really an interesting time because even though they were trying to gain more and more tourism, particularly with Chinese food, in the 1970s and 80s, the growth of Chinatown continued to expand. And so people like Chinatown leaders such as Ping Tom and John Tan and Raymond Lee, some of these early pioneers really had banded together and started to basically lobby a lot of the politicians in investing more infrastructure and more desirable city services into Chicago's Chinatown. And that kind of evolved into this new Chinatown, which they call Chinatown Square.
In the early 1900s, the move allowed for a vibrant community center and a variety of organizations for mutual support and aid. The Chicago affiliate of the National Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association was founded, and it quickly became the largest organizational force in Chicago's Chinese community. In the face of government neglect and discrimination, Chinese mutual aid groups provided social services, arbitrated disputes without the Chicago police to create real public safety, came together to provide economic safety nets, and cared for one another. Mutual aid was for the Chinese, as it is now, a radical act of caring for each other while working to change the world. Looking back to Chicago's Chinatown history can teach us much about how to organize mutual aid.
So Lisa and Penny, it seems to me that when you were doing this film, that you discovered a lot of positives. You know, you have the negative DC. I used to go to DC all the time when I was a kid, and not a single restaurant or store or any of the places we used to go to are left. So clearly Chicago had a lot going for it. So if you could talk about places like San Francisco where that political activism really worked, but what specifically around Chicago really kind of came together to make this a positive story?
There's so many aspects of it. I mean, I think, you know, to me, what really struck me in making the film was all of the activism that was happening from the grassroots level. I mean, really, Raymond Lee, his story to me was really incredible. I read his book, and in his interview, he talked about Ping Tom, who, you know, as we know from the film, Ping Tom passed away several years ago. But, you know, Ping Tom and his civic duty, you know, this feeling of like giving back and giving back to the community. Like, you can't just come in here, make money, and then just take off. What are you going to do for the community? What will you do for us? And, you know, I think for Raymond Lee, you know, through his friendship with Ping Tom and others, he got involved. You know, he is a successful businessman, and he gave back by buying the building that he lived in as a child and worked in, and now has turned into a museum. So I feel like, to me, like that kind of giving back was really powerful, because it wasn't just obviously Raymond Lee, it was Ping Tom and a number of people. You know, I think even, you know, stories like June Coutre, who didn't even grow up in Chinatown, right? But her parents lived there. When she herself was having a family, you know, she thought, wow, well, I want my child to know her parent, you know, to know, you know, her own, you know, her grandparents and her culture. Let's move there, right? And so to me, that was really powerful. What blew me away also was that, you know, today there's a group that is trying to get a high school in the area, which I thought was incredible.
And Penny,
Yeah,
conversely,
what Lisa said, community activism, and for example, Gene Lee, he is the founder of the Chicago Chinatown Special Events. And they're the people that host the Lunar New Year parades, but not only that, they do summer festivals, quite a few of them throughout the year, I believe. And these events bring people together, near or far, and they have them often. And, you know, listening to the community people doing things in Chinatowns, it's just an amazing give back. And I've learned so much from that. And I'm hoping that in DC, we can start, you know, begin to have a lot more of community activism, advocacy, and things like that for us as well.
It's also great to know that, you know, Gene's daughter is now the city council person representing Chinatown.
Right, so important.
So, you know,
yeah.
it is about, you know, making sure that, you know, we keep those lines of history of representation, advocacy, you know, for the community alive. Otherwise, public policy makers are not going to listen to us.
As Jean said, a seat at the table. What also sort of strikes me, what Andrew, you had talked about also, and certainly Penny, you know about, that in D.C., what ended up happening, people who are of Chinese descent ended up selling their places basically to the highest bidder and moving out, and therefore all those kinds of touchstones went away, whereas in Chicago, something else completely was happening.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Chicago is very, very personal to me as well, in the same manner as Penny, because I immigrated My grandfather picked me up from O'Hare, and we went back to Wentworth, right? And that's where I live, in Chinatown. And so, and he was the chair of the Leong for many, many years, and he could tell you all these particular stories that, the police, the cops, they're not going to ticket us. Why? Because, we talked to City Hall, right? And so even back in those particular days when we really didn't have any Asian American representation, there are still inroads. But you need to make sure that, there are those particular roads, those avenues for advocacy. And moving ahead now, the biggest threat to Chicago is, in fact, the kind of massive gentrification that we see, because 2 blocks north of Chinatown is this new development called the 78 that is going to bring in 10,000 units of housing.
Precisely. So, I can't believe how quickly the time has gone. We didn't get a chance to get to the questions, but Nam Pham, your question about gentrification will be handled by our friend Danielle Kim next up. So I wanted to thank you, all 3 of you, our filmmakers. Thank you so much for doing this incredible film and sharing it with the world and all of us. And of course, Andrew Leong, your insightful comments about, our future and past of Chinatown, just so important. And thank you so much to all 3 of you for joining us. And we have our next clip up, which really talks about what is happening and sort of sets up what happened in Chicago, what were the positives, but also, as Andrew will point out, what are the same kinds of concerns around gentrification that are happening in Chicago today, because interesting that property is now very, very popular. So let's take a look at that clip, and then we can set up for our next panel.
Thanks, Liz.
Thank you.
They have attractive spaces, a park. They have a water view, as well as highway access. Chicago Chinatown is also located on a transit line. All those particular features that we're seeing the demise out of the traditional older Chinatowns across the rest of the country, those are the kind of danger signs, the warnings that the residents and the leaders within Chicago Chinatown needs to be aware of, and to make sure that policymakers address, to preserve, to make sure that this community exists into the future.
It is becoming very popular, and the proximity to downtown Chicago continues. It gets closer and closer as downtown continues to expand south towards Chinatown. There is now a new development called the 78, which is slated to become the new great development within Chicago. And this is by the same developer that did Hudson Yards in New York and were so successful. But along with that comes some of the problems and challenges of possible gentrification of Chinatown. And there are a lot of people who are very concerned about that. I talked earlier a little bit about the great architecture and the architecture that is making Chinatown so fantastic in the tourism, but it also makes it much more desirable in terms of a place to live. So, when we talk about Chinese only advertising their real estate in Chinese newspapers and with Chinese real estate brokers, that's a good thing because it continues to evolve that way. But there's also the other side of the evolution of whether there is also a place not only for affordable housing and more affordable housing for a growing senior population, frankly, but also for an ability for wealthier Chinese to be able to move into the neighborhood as well.
I'm excited about the number of Asian Americans who are running for office and entering electoral politics. Self-representation is very important. For the first time, Chicago has its first Chinese American alderperson to serve in Chicago's City Council. Yay, Nicole Lee. We need to challenge the so-called model minority myth that has historically pitted our success at the expense of African Americans and other people of color. Asian Americans need to fight back against the representation of ourselves in ways that have contributed to other forms of racial injustice. We need to acknowledge that Asians have often been given advantages over Black and brown people, and how the eventual acceptance of Asian people as a so-called model minority has roped us into being surrogates for white supremacy. Chinatowns need to become spaces to organize, to join, and build solidarity movements with Black Lives Matter, for example, and other movements against racial injustice and against white supremacy and against racial capitalism. Chinatowns also need to, at this moment, not be so insular and focus only on economic growth. For example, with global warming providing an existential threat to all of us, Chinatowns can and need to also be centers for our environmental justice. Thinking expansively about our engagement with the larger world is critically important for Chinatowns today.
Thank you so much to our Chicago panelists for those words of wisdom. So let's shift gears a little bit to examine the future of our local affinity neighborhoods in the greater Boston area. Moderating our second panel this evening is our friend and colleague, Danielle Kim, Director of Asian Community Fund at the Boston Foundation, which was established to increase the visibility of the Asian American community and expand resources to help disadvantaged Asian Americans. Welcome, Danielle. Joining her is Sothea Chiemruom, is Executive Director of the Cambodian Mutual Assistance Association and with the mission to help Cambodian Americans and the economically disadvantaged in Lowell with education, cultural, economic, and social programs. Also joining us is friend Annie Lay. She is the president of the board of the recently designated Boston Little Saigon, she also currently volunteers at the Networking Organization of Vietnamese Americans. And of course, longtime supporter and friend Andrew Liu is executive director of the Asian Community Development Corporation, which focuses on affordable housing and community development and is overseeing the asset management of 300 plus units and has been the lead on projects worth more than $95 million. Welcome, and take it away, Danielle.
Thank you so much, Liz. It's wonderful to be here today. You know, as Liz mentioned, here in the greater Boston area, we have a number of cultural enclaves and affinity neighborhoods, both historic and emerging. We also know that these neighborhoods play a really important role in supporting our local communities. But we also know from the film that there are immense threats of what can happen if we take these neighborhoods for granted. I'm so excited to be here with the three of you, these three phenomenal leaders who are really working to make sure that these neighborhoods flourish and thrive. I want to start with you, Annie, the newest affinity neighborhood that has emerged in greater Boston, Little Saigon, which is really situated at the heart of the Fields Corner neighborhood in Dorchester. And we know that we're about to hit the 1-year anniversary of formally being established as a cultural district. So happy almost anniversary. I'd love to hear, what was the impetus for this effort kind of coming together as a community, and what benefits have you seen in terms of unifying and formalizing in this way?
Thank you, Danielle. Really, the work has been coming from the community and the community leaders. The leaders in the community for years have said, this is like Little Saigon, this is where their home is. And so when the city and state started to have a process for the cultural district designation, they were like, hey, why can't we do this? And so we put it together. We realized as we were putting together the application that a lot of the resources and programs already exist. There's a Vietnamese language school, there's multiple martial arts schools, there's supermarkets catered to the Vietnamese groceries and meals, plethora of restaurants with different types of Vietnamese food. When people ask me, like, what I can eat, I'm like, what do you want to eat? There's so many different types. Businesses from tax accountings, there are constructions, there's so many different things that already exist. what we found our work to be is that we had to put in the application and we just had to market the area so that people can know, like, this is where the Vietnamese community comes to, like, buy their groceries. It's like, you know, where people go to Chinatown to, like, remember their culture. Vietnamese folks come to Fields Corner, and that's where they go depending on where they live. People travel all the way from Maine or Rhode Island just to come to Dorchester. And I grew up in California, and I would remember driving to Little Saigon in Westminster 2 hours for a single trip to buy groceries because that's what we did on the weekends. And so it's the same here in New England. And so it's been a great effort from the community leaders. Again, like, they have put in together the work. The religious organizations have been there as well. The benefits we have seen is that there's been greater funding available for us to help with the events and programming, which we're going to see coming up, where there's great plans coming for more arts coming in the neighborhood and also events. But then also we're going to work on marketing to make sure that our businesses can thrive where they are and so that we can stay where we are instead of being moved out as what we saw in Chicago. And we'll see what happened in Boston. But that's where, you know, we want the community to stay and to be able to come and have children visit to, like, learn about their culture. And so we're trying to make sure that work stays there.
That makes sense, and it certainly resonates. It's almost a spiritual event in which your family takes that exodus and goes to the weekly H Mart visit or your local supermarket, and that's where you find community and culture. And I so appreciate you also mentioning, you know, the businesses and residents and organizations there have been there for some time, and they've been doing amazing work. So in some ways, this is kind of recognizing what has already been happening in that community for a number of years. Thanks for sharing that. I next want to turn to Angie. Angie, you know, you've really been at the front lines of preserving and expanding affordable housing and vibrant spaces in Boston, Chinatown, and beyond. And so I would love to hear about some of the most pressing local needs that you see within the community and the work that you've been doing to really make sure that all the residents who call that neighborhood home are supported and have all the services that they need.
Sure. Thank you, Danielle, for that question. As we saw earlier in the documentary, Boston's Chinatown, like many Chinatowns, which has been around since at least the 1870s, the genesis was that people congregated there because they were not welcome anywhere else. And so for more than a century, Chinatown has remained this both a physical landing hub for Chinese and Asian immigrants, but I think also the emotional and cultural and psychological home for many. And, you know, it was not until probably the last 2 decades that Chinatown became more desirable and this displacement and gentrification pressure really built up. So my organization, the Asian CDC, we've been tackling this with 2 strategies. So the first one is really about creating more affordable housing. We try to leverage publicly owned land to do that. We had a very successful campaign about a decade ago with what was known as Parcel 24. So that was, as you saw in the documentary earlier, where Paul Lee grew up as a child, and the Turnpike Authority came through and through eminent domain destroyed that whole block. That became available for redevelopment through the Big Dig project, and the community was successful through relentless organizing to reclaim that land so that today we could have about 150 units of affordable housing on there, along with a beautiful open space. We are trying to replicate that same success right across the street on another city-owned parcel called R1. And the beauty of that was because it's publicly owned land, we are able to organize and pressure the city to make that land available for a nominal amount. And so that we are hoping to build another over 100 affordable homes on that site, as well as the first Chinatown Library branch in over half a century. Now, another thing that I do want to talk about is we know that building new housing takes a long time. And so recently, we, for the first time, bought a privately owned occupied building in Chinatown at 64 Beach Street. And this is a strategy that we're trying to pursue more because it has the beauty of preserving the tenancy of both the residents who live upstairs as well as the restaurant that has been there for many years. The second strategy that we pursue is placekeeping. So that's a strategy of using public art and temporary activation along the edges of Chinatown to resist this erosion. We think of gentrification as this, sea waves eroding the borders of the shores of Chinatown, if you will. And what we hear from a lot of residents is that part of the negative impact of gentrification is that they feel like they don't belong there, right? All these new shops moving in and new people moving in, and they don't even belong in their own neighborhood. So through placekeeping efforts, we engage local artists to work with our immigrant Chinese-speaking residents to create beautiful public art that they feel like they had a direct impact on. And recently, we partnered up with Tufts University that did a study on one of our placekeeping projects on Hudson Street. And that has shown through that public art process that has really increased the sense of belonging as well as the love of social cohesion.
That's really helpful, Angie. And, I think it's so powerful to think about the opportunity that both public land and private ownership play in expanding affordable housing. And of course, what you said earlier about placekeeping, arts, culture, that's what keeps our neighborhoods vibrant. So thank you for the work that you're doing. I next want to travel up a little bit north to Lowell, to you, Sothea, and the work that you're doing at the Cambodian Mutual Association. I was in Lowell about a week ago, and I was just really struck by how the Cambodian community not only powers the local economy, truly, but has made some significant strides in terms of growing into a number of the local elected offices. I know Lowell now has the first Cambodian American mayor in the country, and yes, that deserves an applause. So it's been really tremendous to see all of these developments emerge. So I would love to hear from you about kind of the role that this affinity neighborhood plays in fostering a sense of belonging, but also giving people and residents a seat at the table where decisions are actually being made.
Well, like we said, there's a lot to like about Lowell. There's a lot to do in Lowell. Well, that's just my added half of the statement there. I want to start by sharing in terms of how we got to Lowell. In the late 90s, in the late 80s, that's when most of us Cambodians start to move to Lowell. Most of us back then were second migrants. Why did we move to Lowell? Because one, it was for economic reasons. Two, lower rental costs versus Boston. So those were the kind of the starting factors for us to start moving. Despite the fact that back then statements were made like, oh, we moved to Massachusetts because of the welfare magnet and whatnot. So those were the challenges that we had to face as a community. But so when we started to move, just like any newcomer community, we start to build association, we start to build groups, and word start to spread that there's a lot of jobs, manufacturing, assembly line, sewing, soldering, those types of jobs. Because we just beginning to come to the U.S. starting in '81. So a lot of us, for those of you who know the history of Cambodia, a lot of us escaped the Cambodian killing fields. So we, many of our educated community members were murdered and whatnot. So we came, and then it started to build up a sense of belonging. start with the temple, start with the groceries, start with the different businesses. That's when the CMAA started back in '84 to provide the support, the Cambodian Mutual Assistance Association, to provide the direct services for those of us who just newly arrived to Laos. And then it's, so if I want to rattle some names, we had the CMAA, we had the Cambodian American League of Law, we had the, start now, they have the Angkor Dance Troupe. So through that process, there were many challenges in terms of what we need to do to get to where we are now. And until 90, and one of the organization that I was involved with that nobody knows now, or at least in our younger population in Laos, is the Cambodian American Voter League, which was trying to, on Saturday, we would get our membership to go volunteer, teach our elders or adults to learn, prepare for the citizenship so that we can become citizens. I myself back then was community organizer, so this was something like, I thought that it's very needed for our community to move ahead. And it was a very challenging, because coming from where we came from, it was, being persecuted and all of that, it was hard to get people to think that, we could make a difference. Until 1999, when we had the first Cambodian American elected city council members. From that point on, of course, there are still many challenges that in terms of getting everyone to work together, become a citizenship, register to vote, and get out to vote. So there's all these challenges that we had to face. And then move things faster along is about 4 or 5 years ago, a group of not just Cambodian but other ethnic minorities in Laos started a lawsuit against the city, and the city settled into, well, let me back up a little bit. In Laos, the election, all the 9 city council seats were elected all at large, and that means most of the city council came from 2 neighborhood. The Belvedere neighborhood, which is the most affluent neighborhood, and then the Upper Highlands neighborhood, which is the kind of, you can say, the second affluent neighborhood on the outskirts of Laos. So with the lawsuit was that we demanded more representation. And when the city settled was that it turned to be, now instead of 9 at-large seats, became 11 seats, 3 at-large, 8 district. And that's how we were able to have now 3 elected Cambodian City Councilor, 2 elected state rep, and 2 elected city Laos school committee. I guess what I want to share is that these are it's been a long 25 years or so slow progress, and we are proud of what we've done. But I think given all these things, and I personally feel that we need to really continue to come together, and not just within our Khmer community in Laos, but the other minority groups in Laos. We are Laos now receiving Afghans refugees, Ukraine refugees, and there's an increasing population of African community also. So with all of these, that's we'll work together among other partnership in Laos to help build our group. Now we have. Well, 25 years now, we have the Laos Southeast Asian Water Festival, which happens every 3rd weekends in August, 3rd Saturday in August, that attracts 60,000 or so folks from all across the country and out of the country also. People plan vacation to come to visit so that they can be part of, and I'm happy to say that since COVID, this August 20 will be the first, the committee restarting the water festival again, so that it will bring folks together, will kind of have a sense of a community, because we have been kind of isolated just because of COVID and living in our own kind of just among friends or whatnot. So this is, as we are moving forward, there's a lot of work ahead.
Great. Great, and that's such a powerful example of how in Lowell they've really been able to translate this bustling affinity neighborhood into really achieving some political influence and power. That's
I want to
really
add also,
tremendous.
At some, I forget the year, we have a Cambodia Town, which is, if you go to Lowell, there's a big overpass. Now we are working with the city. So with all of these, now we're at the table, we were talking about at the table. Now we're at the table, we're able to leverage that and work with the city. The city is, CMA is, for the next 3 months, we are doing pop-up meeting to get people's input, how we can increase, how we can beautify, create a more vibrant Cambodia Town. And we are now even talking about building a Cambodia Town gate. Now, that would be a dream that for me, if we get to that point.
Wonderful. That's great. So I also want to incorporate some questions that we've received from our audience. So our first question comes from Aubrey Tang of Acton. Aubrey acknowledges that there are a number of new businesses coming into the affinity neighborhoods of Greater Boston. She specifically cited just the surge of bubble tea shops and fusion food restaurants. So, these are different businesses than had historically been in these neighborhoods. And so I'd love to hear from, the three of you, what do you see as the future of these neighborhoods, and how can we preserve both history and culture, but also recognize these emerging trends that are occurring here in our modern day?
I'm happy to start. I actually know Aubrey, and she's in Chinatown a lot. She has this project called the Chinatown Project, which tries to bring awareness to a lot of the small businesses in Chinatown. And there is a lot of new, I think primarily what she mentioned was different foods, right? The more trendy bubble tea shops and different things like that. And I think it's a good phenomenon because, it is opening up new business opportunities. I would say a lot of these new businesses, especially food, whether it's ramen shops or bubble tea shops, it is catering to outsiders and not so much Chinatown residents. It is catering to students from nearby colleges, tourists, visitors who come in on a weekend. And that helps to stimulate the economic activity in Chinatown, continues to give it vibrancy. However, we do need to balance that with the long-term establishments that cater to the needs of the long-time immigrants who live there. So I think the strategy is that two things. One is how do we make sure that the commercial rents and those spaces remain affordable for the long-time businesses to be able to stay, because I think when you talk about gentrification, it's not just the residents that are facing rising rents. I think a lot of the longtime mom and pop shops face the same challenges as well. And I think that the second is really, we need more robust small business supports. I mean, I think during the last 2 years during pandemic, we've seen how small businesses in our AAPI communities have just been hit hard, right? I mean, lack of language access, lack of language to even resources that are available, but they don't necessarily have the know-how to how to connect it. So I think, that the making sure rents are affordable and having stronger small business supports are important.
Absolutely. And I wonder if Annie, you want to comment on that. I know as a small business owner, you know very intimately what some of the struggles that Angie's sharing, and really thinking about what we can do, what ordinary individuals can do to support our local small businesses that are in our affinity neighborhoods.
Yes. So everything as Angie says is very true. I actually go to Chinatown quite often because I live right on the outskirts, and I cannot have another bubble tea or a hot pot shop open. I'm just like, I need to eat something else. But it's as I look at for the small business owner side, like a lot of the business owners that originated in Chinatown or in Dorchester are immigrants or refugees who came here, opened their business, and now their children, they want their children to live the American dream, go to college, and then do something that's not what they're doing. A couple of people do follow in parents' footsteps and then run the restaurant, take over the business as their families retire. But the majority of them don't. And so what new businesses come in, like I'm hoping that, you know, some of the cultural foods, some of the cultural trends, like there's a lot of Vietnamese food restaurants can exist that's not hot pot or bubble tea related. But what I would do say about the bubble tea is that because it's becoming more popular, more people know about it, especially in Fields Corner, as someone comes and they look for a bubble tea shop, then they find like the neighborhood restaurant that's there that they wouldn't have necessarily visited. So now it's more exposure to the area as well. But if someone's opening a new business, please don't open another bubble shop in Chinatown. I just need more diverse food, but it's something that, you know, it's great, it is trendy, but I'm hoping that people can see that there's diversity in the foods as well, as opposed to just, you know, what's already existing there.
Absolutely. And I'd love to pick up on another audience question that we received from Clara Lucian of Roslindale. So she talks about issues around kind of solidarity and allyship. She notes that, you know, displacement and gentrification is not only affecting AAPI affinity neighborhoods, but many historically marginalized neighborhoods in our region. So what can we do to connect in this kind of shared effort, the shared fight, to make sure that the residents who live in these neighborhoods can continue to stay there and thrive? I don't know, Sothea, you want to start?
You know, one of the things that I just talked mentioned earlier about the Cambodia Town neighborhood meeting or neighborhood planning. One of the things that we are doing is that we're not just going to talk. Well, next to Cambodia Town area, there is a park. Right now, it's officially called the Clemente Park. There's been and all of us in the neighborhood, we call it the Bailin Park, which is a Cambodian name. And it's a thriving park. We have youth and adults playing volleyball, playing bocce, playing basketball in that park. So within that 2 or 3 block area, we have businesses, we have residentials, and we have this park. And our effort is that we are going to not only talk to the business and how we can make from the sidewalk safe for people who are walking from the store to the park and from across the street, whatnot, but also the surrounding blocks. And we are going to be reaching out to those residents also and the owners because most I would say majority or at least half of those buildings surrounding it are rental apartment. So we not only need to be talking to the people who live there, rent there, but the owners there, so they can upkeep the units, the apartments, but also get them involved in the process how we can maintain the neighborhood. One of the, there's a lot of we talk about businesses. One of the things that I personally kind of talk about is that, all of our food businesses are more like the moms and pops. And so sometimes it's not as attractive maybe to the non-Cambodian or, for folks in the neighborhood. So in our neighborhood, I'm glad to see that some of these new businesses, new restaurants and whatnot, they are more geared toward non-Cambodian also because and so now, so that it's more like, okay, if you live there, you know which one to go to where you get real authentic Khmer food. And then there's other places you go more, okay, if you want something more blanded or blended, then you go to that one. That kind of thing. So what I'm trying to say is that we're seeing that. And that's a good thing because we need to be kind of open up and in terms of our commitment and our relationship with the population at large. And that's how we have built the, can we empower our community and leverage our community because we cannot be isolated into our little Khmer area.
Absolutely. And I know our time's coming to a close, but I would love to offer some closing thoughts from all of you. You know, Andrew earlier mentioned the growing rates and the long legacy of anti-Asian racism and violence that have long existed in this country and that we're seeing reemerge in a really troubling way right now. So when you think about that, plus the ongoing pandemic and the, you know, really enormous challenges facing small businesses across our region, you know, why are our affinity neighborhoods so important to preserve?
Well, that's identity and culture. I mean, you go and you look at the, you know, through the window, you see, that's a Khmer household. Or, you know, because that it feels a sense of belonging, feel a sense of, because that's one of the main reasons we all start to kind of, I grew up here. This is my neighborhood, by the way, Alston, Brighton. But professionally, I've been working in Leong or hanging out in Leong, having friends and volunteer in Leong. But identity, I think, and a sense of culture, a sense of belonging, it's very important. So I would say that's the main reason that it's very important to not only continue to build it as a community, but continue to include the larger community also. That's how you can, I think, help maintain our belonging and our identity.
Great, thank you for sharing that. And so Annie and then Angie.
Yeah, we just want to, the sense of belonging and the relationships, I definitely agree with, but it's also the resources in their native language has been really helpful. And so you know that, like, especially with the rise in AAPI, hey, like, there's people looking out for each other. There's, the community comes together and like, hey, let's make sure our elderly have someone to go to the grocery store with or go to the doctor's appointment with, and they receive services in their native language, which makes them feel like they belong here. And so the resources have been also really helpful.
And Angie, what do you see as the importance of these neighborhoods?
I agree with Annie because Chinatown continues to be a landing pad for many recent immigrants. And so living in Chinatown, for many of them, it's not about choice, it's out of necessity. For people who have limited English proficiency or without a lot of families or social networks here, Chinatown enables them to be connected to jobs, to services, education, healthcare, all of those things. And without these affinity neighborhoods, they really would not be able to survive very well on their own.
Wonderful. Well, that concludes tonight's conversation and this amazing panel. Please join me in thanking these phenomenal leaders, Sothea Chiemruom, Annie Lei, and Angie Leong. Great. Great. I now have the pleasure of transitioning us to our next segment and introducing our good friend, Leverett Wing. Leverett serves on the GBH Event Planning Committee and is also a board member, and he's been instrumental behind the scenes in supporting a number of Asian American Pacific Islander heritage events over the past many years. So please, let's welcome Leverett Wing to the stage.
Thanks. Thanks, Danielle, and thank you again to all the wonderful panelists. That is fantastic, and let's give them one more round of applause. So good evening, everyone. As Danielle mentioned, my name is Leverett Wing, and I am a very proud member of GBH's Advisors Council, and I'd like to offer my sincerest thank yous to the dozen GBH board members who you may have seen earlier on one of the slides, the countless GBH staff, and our partners at WTTW in Chicago who helped plan tonight's event, which has become an annual celebration for our community for over a decade. And as you've seen, every year for over a decade, we've enjoyed some wonderful, insightful panelists. We've addressed important, timely topics. And when we're together, we enjoy some wonderful food and a great time for us to gather and celebrate our community. And one person who deserves an enormous amount of credit for this and what we're part of today is GBH's president and CEO, John Abbott. To take a step back, My wife, Marion, and I hosted the very first GBH AAPI Heritage Month event in our small one-bedroom condo in Boston over a decade ago. And I actually, because I'm a pack rat, I have the original invitation here. Now, when I first broached the idea to Marion, I told her, it'll be a small group. It'll be some small group of community leaders. We'll talk with John about GBH programming, some of the ideas that we have. It'll be 10, maybe 15 tops. And you can see where this is going. And she gave her blessing, and so we scheduled it. And then John saw the potential in our event, and he put his full weight and vision behind it, and along with the full weight of GBH. And before you knew it, besides him coming to speak, we had Marita Rivero, who at that time was the VP and General Manager for Television and Radio with GBH. We had Professor Paul Watanabe come to moderate. And we were previewing over 25 AAPI Heritage Month programs being shown on GBH that month. And before you knew it again, we had over 60 people RSVP. We had a caterer involved. GBH found us a caterer. And we had to turn people away. Our building had to turn people away, some literally at the door. And it was a wonderful event. John and his team answered question after question, listened to idea after idea, and were so engaging and so receptive. And when it was over, Marion gave me her patented, "I really enjoyed doing it, but it wasn't what you pitched me" lecture. Don't worry, I get it all the time. But we also had the genesis of something special. And just as importantly, we had the momentum and the backing from the top to build on that. And I can say without hesitancy that without John Abbott, his commitment to get our event off the ground during those first few years, and his commitment to our community, that our celebration, what we see here today, would not be nearly the success that it is today. Filling the auditorium, especially before the pandemic, and now with over 1,100 viewers remotely annually. And it really has become something of an anchor event for our community that people look forward to every single year. And people ask me about months in advance, and we start planning for months in advance. So we are indebted to you, John. Thank you so much for that, and for that we thank you. But John's support for our and other BIPOC communities goes far beyond this particular event. John's always been an advocate for, an ally for diverse communities and programming. In 2007, he partnered with WNET to create World Channel, and has given his unflagging support to its mission to discover and amplify multicultural filmmakers who report from the hearts of their own communities, much like we saw tonight in A Tale of Three Chinatowns. Programs like American Experiences, the Chinese Exclusion Act, and all GBH strands, including America Reframed and Frontline, have benefited from John's unwavering support of BIPOC communities. This month alone, World 7 film shorts by emerging AAPI filmmakers from ADOC, which John mentioned a little bit earlier, is funded by GBH thanks to John. John's encouraged community convenings and educational opportunities for the greater AAPI community. He's fostered important conversations. He's made GBH a more inclusive community that works to convene conversations around diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. And most important, one of his most important and most impactful moves related to the AAPI community was personally recruiting GBH's General Manager of Television and World, Liz Chang. Exactly. And Liz is a much needed and, by the way, way too humble champion of, role model for, representative, and face of our community, who says she credits John's support and for all she's accomplished with AAPI communities here and across the country. And on a personal, John's just a really good guy. he's been, he was so supportive of me during some, personally some very difficult times. We bonded countless times over our respected mothers, and I consider him a friend. And I, along with so many others, will miss you dearly. So John, on behalf of the Board Planning Committee, as well as AAPI communities in Boston, across Massachusetts, and around the nation, we thank you for your tireless commitment to our community, and it is my true honor to present you with the inaugural AAPI Chinatown Gate Award. And the award reads, the 2022 inaugural Chinatown Gate Award, presented to Jonathan C. Abbott for your dedication to the AAPI community, GBH AAPI Heritage Committee. Thank you so much, John.
I'm going to take this from your hands and then I'm going to hug you.
Oh my gosh.
I'm terrifically moved, and it means a lot to me to accept this from Leverett. Speaking of modest, Leverett also served on our community advisory board, and that was where he and I first met. And I am truly humbled at this recognition, but it's grounded in my gratitude to so many people, leaders throughout our communities who continue to give GBH a chance and to imagine with us what public media should mean for the country. And Leverett, thank you. You've always been a tireless friend and encourager and counselor. And you see a number of remarkable people who, including Helen, who's here, who welcomed me 24 years ago to GBH, and Paul, and and Fran, and Susan, and it's just such a great group, and Rebecca. I'm truly humbled. I'm extraordinarily moved at the discussions about Lowell tonight remind me that the great part about public media in this country, and what Liz and others have built, and the committee really has fashioned this event, and really as a frame for the way in which we can think about connecting with communities and community leaders and driving discourse and understanding of critical topics. Public media in this country is the last locally owned, operated, and governed media in this country. And I know our board members understand that because they hear it from me all the time. And so the themes that I was hearing around the panel, around a place at the table, empowerment, understanding the strength of community, that's, to me, public media is, as present as we are in these communities around the country, what we are building in Boston and greater Boston, across the Commonwealth, we have the opportunity in public radio and public television, public media, as Liz knows so well, to replicate all around the country. And that's why tonight's collaboration with our colleagues in Chicago moved me. But at a time where media is it's a little like gentrification in the manner in which it scales and becomes all national, we run the risk of losing the opportunity of staying centered at our communities and their needs. And to me, the work that Leverett and Liz and others and leaders on the committee have done through the years, it's been the lens through which we've understood how GBH can continue to build on and fulfill its mission of service and representation, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. Thank you very, very much. And I am very, very grateful to the committee and to everyone who's worked so hard to imagine how much more work we can do every year and how much better we can be. Thank you very much.
Okay. Do we need to hold it? There we go. Awesome.
Hello, everyone. Oops. My name is Emily Yu, and I am a longtime supporter who served on GBH's Community Advisory Board, and I'm a current member of the Planning Committee for tonight's AAPI Heritage Month celebration. I'm a loyal donor to GBH because I've seen and experienced the importance of public media in our community. Indeed, I grew up watching PBS, and shows like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Sesame Street, Square One Television were a staple in my childhood. Tonight, we've watched excerpts from the comprehensive film, A Tale of Three Chinatowns, and heard from two insightful panels about affinity neighborhoods in Chicago, Greater Boston, Lowell, and beyond. Whether it's local news on GBH 89.7 and GBH 2, or it's national programs from Frontline, Nova, Masterpiece, American Experience, America Reframed, Local USA, Stories from the Stage, and so many more, GBH discovers and amplifies diverse voices, as with those heard tonight. GBH focuses on the differences that make a difference through its stories that are produced here and shared with the world. Would you consider being a loyal ally of GBH or its partner, WTTW in Chicago, for their work in local communities and across the country? If you live in the area, you can volunteer your time or donate to support programming and events that help us learn, appreciate, and celebrate differences. Please consider joining our public media family and supporting at any level. It's easy to do for our remote audience. Just click on the link in the chat tab and give what you can. If you're joining us here in person, we will provide more information on memberships at the reception following this. And as a reminder, we'll share all of tonight's resources with you in our follow-up email. Thank you for joining us tonight, and we hope to see you again soon. And now, back to Liz Chang.
Thank you, Emily, for all that you do. And I think you might have a job on air with us. You did a great job. Just want to remind everybody here that there is a feast waiting for us. And knowing that I'm standing between you and eating, I will try to make this quick. First of all, I want to thank WTTW, Tim Russell, and President and CEO Sandra Cordova-Misek for partnering with us on this event. We thank our wonderful filmmakers, Lisa Mao and Penny Lee, for sharing and talking about this wonderful film. And as a reminder, A Tale for Three Chinatowns will premiere on World Channel. And if you don't know where to just email me and I'll tell you where to tune in. May 23rd at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and in Chicago at 7 p.m. Thanks again to all of our contributors, Sothea Chiemruom, Anna Lei, Dr. Lisa Yun Lee, Andrew Leong, Angie Liu, Ernie Wong, and our deep gratitude to Danielle Kim for moderating this important conversation. Thank you so much. And thanks to our GBH Board of Trustees, Board of Advisors, Advisors Council, and Community Advisory Board. We could not do this event without you and your great ideas. And thank you also to our community partners, including King Boston, NAACP Boston, Boston Asian American Film Festival, the Partnership, the Asian American Resource Workshop, and so many others for their support of GBH and their partnership. And how can we not thank the incredible GBHers who helped pull all this together, Amy Axelrod, Kate Kataja, and the amazing Liz Haggart, and Sandy Chin, who's been sitting over there giving me cues. So yay. And our wonderful GBH technical team here as well. This was very complicated to do, as you can probably imagine. Stay informed about upcoming events by visiting our events page at gbh.org/events, and learn about amazing documentaries like the ones we've been watching tonight by subscribing to World Channel's newsletter. Good night, all, and let's eat.